Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Brian. This is Tech Therapy. I am joined today by my partner in crime, Stop the FOMO. FOMO, this is a tech therapy video. This is our third video already this year, and I wanted to save this one before the TVs come out. And it is the new TV arms race. I'm talking about Hisense versus TCL,
Mhm.
TCL versus Hisense. To me, FOMO, these are the emerging powers in the TV industry. Last year, we did a video very much like this, and it was met with a lot of disbelief. There's no way these
Yep.
companies can actually conquer the top three. They'll never really break in. And FOMO, I think our opinion has changed in this full year, where these two are going to be the two leading superpowers in the TV industry. So I'm going to have you with the table set. Let me know your thoughts on my thoughts of these two becoming the new superpowers.
And let me give some context. When we say superpower, we're not talking about sales volume or quote unquote, they have the best TV that will win the shootout. This is the context that you'll have to understand. Right now, the most advanced technologies that Samsung and Sony are using likely coming from TCL or Hisense. So, for example, TCL is providing everyone who wants the most wide viewing angle on a VA panel LCD TV. It's coming from TCL, HVA, WHVA, HVA Pro, whatever they call it. It's not homemade from Samsung or LG or Sony. They're sourcing it from TCL. Or if a company wants RGB mini LED, Samsung gets it from Hisense or someone similar, maybe TCL's making it, but they're not making it in-house. They're getting it from them. They bring it home, they call it micro LED, RGB micro LED, or they give it some other magic name. But where is it coming from? It's coming from Hisense or TCL. And this is the crazy thing. They're continuing to push the advances in LCD mini LED TV technology. Like this year, TCL's announced 23-bit processing. This is just months after Sony launched its Bravia 9 with 22-bit processing. And so you start to wonder, wait, did Sony maybe source the raw panel from TCL CSOT? And then they added their magic software because ultimately software is a separator. So I'm going to give the other TV, all the TV brands that respect is when they bring it back, it's what you do with the hardware. But the arms race starts with the hardware. And it's crazy that we flipped the script for TCL and Hisense. We're throwing off the shelf TVs, like $200 TVs, the special at Walmart. Now they're supplying the world with the absolute highest performing parts for them to create their TVs, including in-house at TCL and Hisense. So yeah, absolutely, this is a arms race between the two top LCD, mini LED TV makers in the world when it comes to advanced technology, hardware at least, and that's unbelievable.
Well, and FOMO, we're talking about not just the advanced technology, the flexibility, the
Mhm.
size, and the ability to see into the future where mini LEDs, giant mini LEDs, were going to be the future. While the rest of us put mini LEDs as pure value and maybe even being dead with quantum dot OLEDs, micro lens array. We wondered why TCL and Hisense had their prototype OLEDs, but never really brought them to market. They're already looking into the future. And to put a finer point on that, FOMO, Hisense created the first mini LED. A lot of people think, well, which
No,
one
you
was
mean
that?
TCL?
TCL.
TCL,
TCL had the
the 8
first eight.
series,
It
the
was
8
the 8
series. Yeah.
series.
Mhm.
So, when everyone else was doing full array or still direct lit, they were doing mini LED. Hisense was doing more zones. The ability to go from a design that is cheap and maybe has too much branding to the very next year looking higher end, not 3 years later, every
Mhm.
year. Both have excellent sound. Not really a sound bar needed with either one of these TVs. Even their lowest end massive one we saw at Costco FOMO 14.99 has a subwoofer on it. But
Yeah.
what it really got me thinking about this was at CES for 2 different reasons, FOMO. Hisense decides to leave um, their U8 and U7 off for another event. That's confidence. We're here showing these 2 high end. It was the RGB mini LED
Mhm.
116 and their micro LED. Both they said focus on these. These are coming to market this year. confidence for a value brand to not say, "Hey, look at our cheaper stuff." Even their laser TV was really the top 3. TCL goes the other way, FOMO. They go and say, "Look, our new, QM6 is gonna be the first thing out, and by the time you get home, these will be close to being available." So, trend setting FOMO, instead of them being reactive, they are now proactive. And in turn, the rest of the industry is being reactive. For the fact that the last couple of years, Samsung and LG are the first to market every year. Their big guns come out last year, G4, S95D. Year before that, G3, S95C. They bring the big guns out. TCL is releasing their new TV any second. We'll have our review samples within the next few days. That is confidence. Like they know now, you know what? We're actually, and they're not going to put out their big gun. They're going to send you the entry in that tier, that higher end tier FOMO. And they're looking at what I like what they do is say, this version is better than last year's higher end. The QM7 is equal to the year before that's QM8. So same with Hisense. Every year, it's a big jump, not a few hundred nits, not a few hundred zones, bigger jumps every year. So
Yeah.
did you feel like yourself at CES you saw a statement from these two companies more so than almost anybody else?
Well, the best analogy that represents what you just said, which is specifically proactive, how agile they are. And this is how agile they are. And it's scary. When I was talking to the team at Hisense, they're like, we didn't even know how big this TV is going to be, like 116-inch. The reason is we were waiting to see what TCL would bring out in their factories. We have our insiders, and we're waiting to the very last minute for our insider to confirm that TCL's largest TV is the 115, so we could tell our team, make it 116. And on the fly, within the same model year, quickly retooled, boom, 116. Well, guess what TCL is doing? Most likely, they're like, no, 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 we haven't released our 115 yet.
Yeah.
It is very likely they're back there saying, you know what? How about 118? I mean, this is how agile these guys. I mean, they're not even looking at Samsung or Sony. Those guys aren't even in the game as far as TCL and Hisense. They are the new rivals, the superpowers when it comes to mini LED, large TV, feature sets, all of that. I mean, they're trying to one up each other, and that's great for us. Like Hisense announced, was that they're actually implementing four HDMI 2.1, MediaTek's latest and greatest on the
Yeah.
U8 series. And
Yeah.
TCL is like, oh, I mean, will they be able to go back and tool their QM8 in time to do that? We have no confirmation what's going to happen on the
No.
TCL side, but it's just so exciting to see these companies in real time responding to each other. These little anecdotes is what should be scary to the other TV makers like Samsung, LG, Sony. They're planning their TV year, I'd say at least a year ahead of time, right? They have the TV
Yep.
parts, they're putting it together. And here, TCL and Hisense are just waiting for the best sourcing and supplier to say, when's that available? When's that available? Done. Let's do it. Let's see if we can bring out
Yep.
a TV in time. And not only doing it so quickly, the QM6K is arriving this week for both of us, right?
Yep.
How fast is that? When have we ever received a
No.
review TV in
No.
January, not February? I mean, normally February, March, we're being flown into LG, Samsung, wherever, Sony, right, last year. And this is to see the TV. Here, TCL is like, oh, it's launching.
It's at your
We're
yeah.
sending the TVs out now. To get us time, give you time, all the reviewers time to get to know the QM6K. And then there is now, okay, we know where it stands. This is the benchmark to start the year, which is genius. Start with your entry level. It only gets better from there. Whereas, like you've mentioned often, Brian, wow, LG and Samsung and Sony, they hit it out of the ballpark for the best TV. But where does that leave the rest of the lineup? It kind of like downhill, right? It's like
Yeah.
you get excited about the G4, and
Yeah.
then where do you end up with a C4? So TCL's taking the opposite route. They're going to go, you know what? We're going to build the excitement, and you're going to see this layering of better and better as we approach the end of the year. And I don't know which is right. I don't know what's going to drive sales,
Yeah.
but I like that. I like that.
Yeah, and I think what we like also too, FOMO, and talking about being reactive, when you look at what the manufacturers are doing, other than Samsung, which is offering many more models, but they're going the lifestyle route, they're going the artwork route. and they're going to be number one for a while longer. I don't see anybody really threatening that. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, I can say not threatening it for a few more years, not 10 years, not 5 years, but a few more years. But they're nimble as well in terms of sticking with being the only AK team in town. They're still there gaming. All that stuff is still there. But to your point, FOMO, not only is the QM6, speaking about TCL, you're talking about a TV that has how many sizes?
Hmm.
Right? So when we look at the other manufacturers saying, look, our best only comes in two sizes. We only have this 100-inch or 80 or 95-inch is in this one size. They're like, tell you what, if you like that TV, this is what I think about for the QM6. You know what? Buy that one at 55. And then guess what? If you really like it, 75, grab it. How many manufacturers have that offering where it's affordable? But I think that the real important thing, FOMO, is that where we used to say you can either buy the flagship, or I'm sorry, an entry level from one manufacturer or a flagship TCL or Hisense. Now you're actually comparing flagship to flagship.
Yeah,
And them
crazy.
also, you're talking about having more HDMI ports, which the other companies haven't had other than LG and Samsung. You're talking about Dolby Vision, HDR10 plus. You're having just about everything. And also, FOMA, as you're saying, being nimble. I remember Hisense had the stand from the UAK and the U7K. They had that out wide and the up and down. You know, that the kind of
Hmm.
like Sony has. Well,
Hmm.
they didn't like it. In 1 year, they changed it to Samsung's more center stand, where Sony and the other companies have to ride that design out for a while before they can maneuver. They thought, you know what, forget this up down crap. We don't really sell a lot of sound bars. Let's just do this. And that works perfect with their new Saturn. They don't worry about a sound bar.
Yeah.
So that ability to do that, I think, is mind blowing. And they never bit with the OLED thing, FOMO. They're like, yeah, you know what? I'm not chasing that. And to me now, FOMO, they have the innovation, the technology, but really the confidence. Speak to me a little bit about, and I want you to do this for me. When people say CES, they say, "Ah, this year it might have been boring. They didn't see this, they didn't see that." What you and I do different is by talking to the manufacturers, not just the marketing teams, talking to the people behind the scenes, you get the sense of their excitement. And though
Yeah.
can't be quoted, FOMO, and they won't be on camera, you tell me a little bit about what you feel about both these companies and the attitudes they have about not just competing, but being number one. Tell me a little bit about what you felt like you heard from each manufacturer.
So we'll start with what you mentioned with Samsung, focusing on lifestyle. And I'm going to have to give Samsung some respect that they've learned something from Apple. If you notice, Apple products, whether it's the iPhone or it just doesn't matter what Apple product, never technically the best, ever. But the cohesive ecosystem, that takes time. It takes a lot of software design. It takes a lot of UI work. If you notice, that's what Samsung's doing right now. They're like, you know what? We'll let this arms race go. It's doesn't make us any money. We've reached a point where it's pointless for us to engage in the arm race anymore. Let
Yep.
us be Apple, essentially focusing on the whole smart things experience, right? If you're in the Samsung ecosystem, right, all their appliances are connected.
Yeah.
Here's an example. If you're watching something on YouTube on your Samsung phone, that content, that recipe could be linked somehow to your refrigerator so that you essentially can have a keto diet with your refrigerator tracking the nutrients.
Yeah.
This is Samsung's big picture. This is how the TV connects to the phone, connects to your refrigerator, and that takes a
Sound
lot of
system. Yeah.
resources, right? You're
Yeah.
like, look, we can't chase everything down. We think the future is this ecosystem lifestyle with the focus on the life, and if and personally, I think that is more sustainable
Yeah.
as a ecosystem. But on the other side, you have companies like Hisense and TCL where the excitement is about absolute technical superiority.
Yeah.
And this is where a lot of our viewers like, okay, which is the best TV?
Yeah.
I think Samsung and I'm not going to say any other brand for now, but Samsung appears to like, the last 10 years, we've looked at how we're making money. We're not making money on being the best. It's on
Yeah.
things like the frame. The frame has never been the best. Why don't we triple down on that theme?
Yeah.
And so they're focusing on lifestyle and what that means to a consumer, right? AI living, right? That was the theme at Samsung.
Yeah.
So to see on the high sense then to your question, They're so okay. The level of excitement is so high and it moves so fast, they don't even know what's coming next. The RGB mini LED was such a last minute addition. That whole term trichroma was thrown out within what, 2 days of CES? I mean, their marketing team's like, yeah, we don't know where this came from.
We didn't hear it.
That's
I'm
how
like,
fast
yeah, it wasn't in my
that's how
notes.
fast they're moving. They are moving
Yeah,
so fast that
yeah,
by the time R&D gets to the manufacturing, gets to the marketing team, and then you have the USA team, like, wait, what's happening now? Wait, what is
yeah,
this? And now I know why. This is why often the TVs don't even make it to market. The U9N never really made it to market last year. Why is that?
no,
Because they
yeah,
already saw, oh, wait, we've already done better than U9N. Well, let's not even sell it. It's almost the end
yeah,
of the year. Let's,
yeah,
whatever we have, sell it, whatever. We got something better coming. That's how fast they're moving, where we're
yeah,
thinking in annual cycles, which is LG and Samsung, which I thought was fast. Sony could not keep up with that.
yeah,
The Chinese are going at 6 month cycles, not 12
yeah.
months.
Well, yeah,
Samsung and LG needs to get off that train. They cannot keep up with that
no,
development cycle the Chinese are just pouring into. It's absolutely insane how fast they're moving with all these advances. Like, I'm so excited about HVA, wide viewing angle. They got
yeah,
two generations ready to go. They're ready to lay out, but they got to sell this first. I mean, the
yeah,
insanity of how fast they're moving. And so back to what we heard at CES and saw at CES, things were so fast. The excitement, it's like you're in uh, a child's game room where the
yep,
entire team is like, we don't know what's going to happen next, but we know it's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
And you
yeah.
don't get that from anyone else.
No, and so back to what you're saying is again, if you go one layer behind and you talk to the people that are actually in charge of certain things, you can get a feel for what their goals are. And I've mentioned this before. Hisense, even TCL, the first time I met them, they really did not want to hear value brand. They really didn't want to
Right.
hear, don't call us a value brand. And then I've said to the staff, then be in store. Stop being in value locations. Stop having your TV boxes on the floor where the value stuff is. Within a few years, kiosks everywhere. Best Buy, they took over all the Vizio kiosks. They have their massive TVs there. They have their version of the frame there. Hisense, same thing. Hisense and TCL both took over the old Magnolia sections in Best Buy. They outbid Sony, Samsung, and so instead of having 10 smaller TVs, they just have one Hisense, one TCL, right? And then talking about trendsetters, we see Samsung's new 115-inch. Well, that's a
Hmm.
year after TCL did theirs.
Hmm.
So, but now what I think is interesting is the vertical integration of both. TCL's is from top to bottom, but Hisense has a lot of the same qualities and they can now set the stage, and which we should have said back, when they were all introducing things that the other companies have chased after. But they keep the value too, FOMO. But real quick with Hisense, I was worried about Hisense last year for that reason. They had the UX, which really I reviewed the year before at 85 inches. You and I both saw it at the shootout. Then last year, they had the 110 UX, which we never really had a chance to review. You had the U9N, which never really became part of the lineup. I was worried about them till I saw their financials and their numbers.
Oh yeah,
They
they
dominated.
are growing so fast. It's like you're so imagine fielding a team, let's say a football team, NFL, since we're most familiar, and on your team you have the best historic quarterbacks all at their prime. Joe Montana, Troy Aikman,
Yep.
you name it. They're all available. Who do you start? That's the level of excitement. It's like, oh my gosh, we have an all-star team ready to go. Who do we start? What's TCL putting out? And they have an all-star team.
Yeah.
This is the level. And what I want to remind a lot of our viewers is this, right? A lot of you are like, oh, you know what? I trust Samsung, I trust LG. And absolutely, they've earned that reputation. But 20 years ago, they were exactly where TCL and Hisense is today.
Yeah.
When Sony, Panasonic, Sharp, I mean, these were the trusted TV brands. When you went to your Big Al's
Oh
or
yeah. It was
Circuit City,
dude.
right? It was all about, okay, it's Sony, Panasonic, maybe Mitsubishi, maybe a Toshiba. Right? These were the names that you remember. Pioneer,
Hitachi.
of course,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Hitachi, right? These were not cheap TVs. And you had Samsung, like
Oh,
What's
it
that?
was
Like,
the it
where did
was
that
the
come from?
garbage brand. They were the garbage
Lucky
brands.
Gold Star. That was
Yeah.
LG. They
Yeah.
never ever want to be reminded of that name, but that was Lucky Gold Star.
You know, you're right.
And look how long it took them though. It took them 20 years. Look how
Yeah.
fast TCL Hisense is moving. It's not going to be 20 years. When
No.
I first reviewed TCL back in 2019, okay, 6 years later, it only took them 6 years to become a leader. How long did it take Samsung and LG to match Sony and Panasonic, right? Chase Panasonic out of the
Yeah.
market and
Yeah.
put Pioneer out of business.
Yeah.
It did not take them 6 years. And so, for those of you who are questioning TCL's and Hisense's value proposition as a premium brand, oh, give them time. But you're seeing the trajectory. And I
Yeah.
was as skeptical as you 5 years ago. Today, throwing up the hood and looking inside the hood, oh wow, this is legit technology. So, not to sound like a TCL Hisense fanboy, but you have to look at the other side and see where Samsung and LG came from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And where Sony came from when Zenith and Magnavox and RCA was the thing,
Oh
where
my
Sony
god,
was
yeah.
the upstart.
Yeah.
So let's just take it as where we are today. TCL and Hisense is no longer an upstart. When you supply when Sony comes calling and they look for the best technology and they give you a call, that should let all of you know where this technology is actually being
Yeah.
sourced. And I want to give Hisense and TCL the credit because if we see more RGB mini LED type technology, that's all Hisense. I love it.
Well, yeah, and FOMO on top of that, if you have the technology to create the panel, the bit range, everything that goes into it, don't you think they're gonna spend the money on the talent to do the processing?
Oh, you
So
know, let me pause right there. Let's just talk about the talent. I don't know how many employees TCL and Hisense has, but if the theme throughout China is the same, when I heard that BYD, which is the electric car company and battery company in China, at first it was impressive to hear they have 80,000 employees, engineers dedicated to just R&D, not
yeah,
total. And then it
yeah,
wasn't just 80,000. It was 80,000 they hired last year. We don't know
yeah,
how many they have already.
yeah,
This is Chinese style. Look, if we're going to dominate, we will dominate and we're going to call the state, I need another billion to hire another 20,000,
yeah,
whatever it takes. Because the Chinese government has already said, we will dominate world panel market
yep,
and we will give you whatever you need. You need cash? Here it is. And so
yeah,
I love it because as consumers, don't you want a company to have an endless supply of cash to make the best of the best? What would Samsung do with a state-sponsored research team to focus on micro LED? Unfortunately, no one is, right? The Chinese are doing it LCD first. We got LCD now. Next is OLED, which they are building another factory that they want to take all the business away from Samsung and LG and supply Apple with all the RGB OLED they need.
yeah,
And then after that is micro LED. And believe me, they are giving, they're calling the people like I interviewed Ian, right? They're looking, how can we corner the micro LED market next?
yeah, yeah.
When you have an endless pocket, that's what you can do.
Well, and when we talk, and what's so funny too is, you said fanboys, and people will always say, well, and it always depends on what time of year it is. So last year at the end of the year, you saw a bunch of Sony videos from us. They released at the end of the year. Well, these guys are in with Sony. The beginning of the year, these guys are all LG. I hear it every video. I'll hear it in this video. Even though my last video was about QD
It's like
OLED and
it's like
Samsung.
where's the Chinese money?
Yeah, I really wish.
Happy New
Um,
Year.
and so for me, CES, Samsung, I did a video on Samsung's dominance. And that video, people were like, well, how can you say they dominated? It was because they had the best showing. They showed
They
the
did.
most product, the most detail,
Polish. It's just very
polish.
polished. Yeah.
Sony is their stance has been the last number of years is wait for the hype to go down and then release. So they're the main focus. That's worked for them. And again, being the company talked about totally separate from everyone else, except Hisense is taking a little bit of that FOMO and saying, you know what? Let's do a separate showing for our other tier. But what I find fascinating is people saying that we're fanboys. The best part about doing what we do is we don't have to be
Mhm.
our fan or bias. My last one was Panasonic. And that was before they came back. That was the one brand I thought, hey, I don't even need to see a review. We don't buy the TVs ourselves. really to hold on to anymore because it doesn't make any difference. So my point is we have friends at all these manufacturers, all these marketing teams. We care about them all, their jobs, they're important. It doesn't really matter. They all, in our opinion, need to survive. But to think that we like one brand over the other, not really. It actually makes it even when they say, "Hey, you cover everybody." That makes it even. This isn't
Hmm.
a Hisense TCL channel. And how I met you, FOMO, was that you were the first person I know when you first started that covered Hisense. And
Hmm.
people were asking me, and I already had a following at that point, FOMO, but I had no idea. I was like, talk to this guy. And then I never forget, for a couple years, you really were on Hisense. And I think either last year or the year before, you went with TCL as your favorite.
Hmm.
And people are like, oh, whoa, 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 what's going on? I thought you were the Hisense guy. So there is no Hisense guy, there is no LG guy.
No.
We love all the brands. We want them all to succeed. And I can't say it any more clear than that. What we're saying here is that the landscape has shifted dramatically in just
Yeah.
2 or 3 years, but just in 1 year. FOMO 2 years ago, we said mini LEDs were dead. There was no
Hmm.
way to compete with OLEDs. OLEDs were 83 inches at their largest. They were getting brighter than this is key, FOMO. They were getting brighter than mini LEDs. They were actually brighter. G4 S95D.
Oh
Well, the
man.
Bravia 9 wasn't that bright.
Hmm.
Its processing was the key. Well, these companies are like, guess what? We got 5,000 nits. We got 10,000 nits.
10,000
They're
nits.
going to
Yep.
be able to brute force it.
Yep.
And that's something that the other companies, including Samsung, stopped doing. As we mentioned, they're not trying, Samsung was always trying to be the brightest. Sony was trying to be the brightest with the Z9G and the Z9K. Those TVs were $10,000, $15,000. These Chinese brands were able to give you that brute force within because they create their own products. That's where the value comes from. The value isn't because they're cheap garbage. They
Hmm.
build them from top to bottom. They can afford that FOMO. That's what I find to be fascinating. And before we go any further, the Chinese, Korean, I'm not a big fan of naming cultures in that way with any products. But before you say the Chinese are doing this, the Korean companies did this to the Japanese companies before
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
LG and Samsung. That's the way it's always been. The products you're consuming every day, any electronics, are from China, the majority of them. I'm not political. FOMO's not political. We're not even interested in that in that conversation. But as far as aggression and giving you what you want, these two companies are saying, you want larger TVs? I got you. You want brighter TVs?
Hmm.
I got you. You want better local dimming? I got you. You want four HDMIs, 2.1s? I got you. 144 hertz, HDR10 plus, Dolby Vision, sound, FOMO. They give you what you want. Don't you feel that way? They're giving the audience what they want.
Perfect example is the smartphone market. The smartphone market. 10 years ago, every iPhone release was a next generation hardware. Amazing camera, amazing screen,
Yeah.
smallest form factor. Okay, so Apple stopped all that when they couldn't keep up with the technology. And now it's the Chinese smartphone companies that are impressing everyone with the highest frame rates on their OLEDs. And
Yeah.
so this is the thing, right? Smartphone's a great example because you have such a great selection, but it's good enough. Like you don't need to spend $1,000 on a smartphone. $400 and it's more than good enough. The camera's solid, the screen's great. You could spend 1,000, but what is it for that 1,000, right? I mean, the camera's slightly better, and even then,
Yeah.
the Chinese have $1,000 phone that you can play with, and so the TVs are at the point where, at a certain level, all the TVs look the same up to that performance. And I use, watching Columbo. Do you really need a $5,000
Columbo,
TV to watch
baby.
Columbo, right?
Yeah.
And it's about, do you have the content that 5090 to push your TV? But if you're playing on a Switch, why are you getting a G5? Isn't a C3 good enough? Or
Yeah.
a mini LED or a $500 Sony even? The key is at some point, all the TV makers, from Hisense all the way to Sony, all the way to Panasonic, they have to separate themselves beyond just performance. And I think we're still in the stage where it's still fun talking about performance, but at
Yeah.
some point, every TV that starts at $100 is capable of 5,000 nits.
Yeah.
Now where do we go, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
smartphones all over again. Then it's about, well, I want a smartphone that's tiny. I want a smartphone that lifestyle. That's, the ownership experience, everything unrelated to the performance because it's a given the performance is solid. Now it's about the conveniences. It's about, oh, what else can I do with this TV? Does it display art, right? So you have to stop from the enthusiast point of view. It's always about performance because you always have those people that buy the latest iPhone slash Samsung because they want the best camera computing, right? Image computing to get you the best image. That's a rare few that literally buys $1,000 phone every year, every 2 years. But everybody else, they can get a 2-year-old iPhone and still be happy. And I think we're getting there with the TVs. So it's it's less about us being a fanboy, more about we cheer on the TV as long as we know what its use case is. And so we can tell you, oh, you only watch Friends? Well, I recommend this TV. And it ends up being the TV that is great for Friends, but I'm not going to recommend the TV for the person who's watching Jennifer Gala at 5,000 nits, right?
Yeah.
And so we could be a fanboy of the content, and then we need that TV to support the content. So it feels like we're the fanboy of the TV. It's rather we're the fanboy of that use case. If your
Of
use
course.
case
It's
is
always
pure
use case.
sports,
Yeah.
right? If it's sports, oh, suddenly I'm a G4, G5 fanboy. Oh no, no, I don't want just sports. I want big cinema. Oh, big cinema, but you're on a $2,000 budget. Well, TCL is my best friend here, right?
Yeah.
What's your use case? What's your budget? Then we are the fanboy of the right TV for that use case, and that's fine. But we're not a global fanboy of any one brand. It just doesn't make any sense.
No, well, and it doesn't make any sense because and I've said this back in the console wars, when PlayStation first came out, there was the, Sega Saturn, and it's no, each company has to win my business every year. I'm an NVIDIA fan. 5090 is embarrassing in terms of what it compares to a 4090. If AMD comes out something tomorrow and it's better, just like AMD motherboards, I'm sorry, CPUs, I'm
Mhm.
going there. That is what changes for me. It's really which one suits my specific needs, which is why for me, FOMO, I'm still with OLED. 'Cause my specific need is gaming in a dark room. If I was
Yeah,
in a bright
yeah,
room or like the room I'm in now, I'd have to go with something that's 100 inches. And
yeah.
also, FOMO, I love the fact that, again, with TCL, the confidence. We'll be first. Let's do first and we're going to be out first. And I know
Mhm.
it's a risk for them, but the fact is, by the time that you already have it on your way. It's on its way to me. This will before we even attend any of the other manufacturers' workshops, where we're going to be in a controlled environment and we'll be able to film a little bit, or each one does something different. By the time we get hands on, you're looking at April. It's not
Yeah.
even February. A couple days from February. CES was 3 weeks ago, so
Mhm.
they're going to end up, if the product is good, totally alone. You'll see comparisons with this TV from last year's TVs that you and I still have. Then we can compare it to themselves when the next model comes out and the new competitors. They're going to have the spotlight for almost the entire year. We talked about the other manufacturers put out that one bomb, and then that's not bomb, that one weapon, I should say. And that's all they have. So, and I like also FOMO, they're streamlining their lineups. And they're both TCL and Hisense saying, look, not just mini LED. Because if you remember with Samsung and Sony, mini LED was relegated to their one top model or their two top
Mhm.
models. These guys are like, no, let's do them all. Let's do them all mini LED. I think Hisense started that. They're all, I think the six mini LED last year.
Yes,
That's
last
what
year
you
the
said.
6 was a mean LED. Yeah, yeah.
So we didn't even get the six last year. And
It's too much to review. Yeah.
it was still mini LED. So
And if you look at the reviews in terms of the consumer reviews, they loved it. And that's what
yeah,
I look at. Look, obviously, if it turns on, it gets 2 stars. But beyond just turning on, people
power.
loved it, right? They're like,
Yeah.
oh, this is great because once you put your money on it, you're very skeptical because you're within the return window. You're ready to return it like at a moment's notice. And you notice everything, and they're like, wait, this is actually pretty good. I'm going to keep this. And so
Yeah.
when these TCLs and Hisense, the affordable ones, the U6, the Q6 last year, when you start to see the stars go from 3.5 1 year, 4 stars the next, now they're consistently 4.5 or better. That says a lot to me because that's a large sampling of owners, right? It's several hundred reviews. I look at that and I'm like, you know what? they actually like this TV. And that is all I need to know.
Yeah, well, and FOMO, I think if there's one thing that they both have to get better at, and we said this to both of them, it's their customer service and their after, after somebody purchase. We talk about our communities, everybody watching these videos that we do premieres on. We love you guys. Thank you for watching these live with us. It's how is the after sale relationship?
Mhm.
Sony has said to us it's about their after sale, their relationship with the
Well, actually,
consumer.
can we stop there? This is something that's a question we need to pose the consumer. If after sales cost money, nothing is free,
Yep.
and that after sale
I
results in
know
a
where you're going.
Hisense and TCL costing the same as a Sony, do you want that after? Because Sony wants to know too. If you
Yeah.
don't want the after sale, they'll cut their prices by 10%.
Yeah.
But their identity is about that relationship with you. Sony, your
Yeah.
loyalty to the brand. So they need to
Yeah.
have the after sale, but you're going to pay for that. You complain about the Sony tax, but you enjoy the Sony service. Hisense and TCL doesn't have that same level of service because they pass down that saving to you. They
Yes.
will
Yeah.
gladly give you what you said, Brian, right? They'll
Yeah.
gladly give you the support. And suddenly, wait a minute, what happened to the great deal? Well, you guys wanted to support. You guys wanted the 5-year warranty. Now it
Yeah.
costs twice as much.
Yeah.
Why are you complaining? So you can't have it both ways. So
Yeah.
my question to the consumer is, are you willing to take a risk in a TCL and Hisense knowing they don't have these things, but you're getting an amazing price, right? Bang on value.
Yep.
Or go the direction that Sony and LG is not cheap either,
Yeah.
that after service support, all of that great longer warranty, all of that, but it's going to cost 30% more, essentially the price of an LG or a Sony or a Samsung. Can't
Yeah.
have it both ways. So I'm curious to see what our viewers think of that.
Yeah. And FOMO, I'm telling you, I know we talked about this before. I was in Costco, and my favorite large Costco TV is the LG B3, 83 inches. I want to say it's 26. It was 26, 2600. And as I was pivoting with the camera, looking at it, because the B3 is beautiful, there's this
Mhm.
TCL on the floor. Well, it was on two pallets, and it literally was 16.99, 98 inches. I look in the back, the design isn't like the QM8, but it's close enough where I thought it was a QM8, and it had the subwoofer. 14.99, 16. Like how can any of
I-
these companies really compete?
Actually, can I stop you right there? Costco is the great equalizer. If you want after service support, get it at Costco.
That's
You
exactly
get you
it.
get you get the 5-year warranty replacement. I mean,
Yeah,
get a Costco, pay the extra $100 if
yeah.
they even charge the additional anymore. I mean, I think it comes with a price now. 5 years covered or four, whatever that is. That's
No
way
questions
better than
asked.
buying
No
it.
box. Yeah, no
No,
box
no
needed,
box.
nothing.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Just
Well, and
get it
FOMO
over there. Boom. Well, how great
so
is
and
that?
well, and I think to everyone in the chat, when you talk about we said this, if you buy a 100-inch TV, that you're not giving that one to your Aunt Betty. That TV is yours. Well, if the TV is only $1,200 or $2,000, I'm not saying that's not a lot of money, but you'll be okay if it doesn't last. You can't expect it to last 10 years if it's that affordable. So you guys have to like find out what it is you're paying for in that way. You want that to get better, that's going to be added to the price. TCL is going to
Mhm.
have HDMI. I think both TCL and Hisense are going to have HDMI 2.1 on 4. I think Hisense is as well.
No, only Hisense. Okay, so for example, the QM6K is only on two.
Yep.
The Hisense U8, the rumor, very solid rumor, is it's four, the new
Yep.
MediaTek. And
Yep.
we don't know whether the other TCL models will have it on four or not. So we can't confirm or
Yep.
deny that, but we can close to confirm that the U8 this year will have it on four. Plus, one of the four in some regions will be a USB-C display port for PC gaming.
Yeah,
Can you
that's
stop and
nuts.
think about that? I mean, that's
Yeah, yeah.
cutting edge. That's
That'll be
insane.
yeah. And then so quickly with that too, FOMO. So then you had TCL with the X11K. Is it
Yep.
X11K?
Yep.
X11K.
X11K.
And they were vague on that, but they were like, look, this is going to be the enthusiast model. This is going to be the one that is going to do this well. Filmmaker, that kind of TV. In the meantime, you have again Hisense with this 116 UX. So what I think is funny too, FOMO, is they didn't have a new QM8 115. And my thought is this: the QM8 115 rolled out later in the year, where it was with, it was at Value Electronics and it was in other
Mhm.
places. I'm telling you, they're just waiting. to, like, as you mentioned, to say, "You know what? Oh, they have the 116? Okay. I promise you there's gonna be another QM8 this year." It might be at the very end of the year. It'll be
Well
117 as
well,
you've mentioned.
remember they announced the QM9.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Last year, around September, they talked about QM9 being that next generation. So you're still
Yep.
gonna have the QM8 this year, but you
Mhm.
want something better? You have the X11K for cinema enthusiasts, and you have the QM9, which is just brute force 10,000 nits matching
Yeah.
the 116 RGB mini LED or getting close. I mean, it's an arms race. Like everyone else has fallen so far behind in this arms race. And I understand processing. That actually separates the TVs. So this is the
Yes.
first year that TCL has filmmaker mode.
Yeah.
Definitely, we're gonna test that to see how good
That's
it
big.
is,
Yeah.
but if it
Yeah.
if it fixes the TCL's kinda aggressive magenta tint in some TVs prior years, wow, what a killer TV the TCL lineup's gonna be this year. If filmmaker mode does what it's supposed to do, as it's done in all the other TVs, I'm very excited to see that.
Well, and then Hisense's love over there with the, I think it was a Q this year, U8Q, I think is their
Yeah,
letter.
EQ, uh-huh.
The U8Q looks to be how many thousand nits? I mean, it's looking to be more than any mini LED last year that we had home,
Mhm,
more than the 8K Samsungs. So you're talking about what would be considered a value mid-tier, which is really their flagship for most people is the U8. But to have the U8 and the U7, I have them both still here. Um, Tremendous TVs, but they always take to heart when they hear from us in our comments processing. That is where they're
mhm.
beginning to now focus. You know, I think we brought
Yes,
up
they
this
are.
again with the icon Rob Brennan, who said this to me 2 years ago, is that, you know, when you turn around and you look at those companies, they're in the room. They're on the field to some degree, but they're on the sidelines. He goes, then you turn around and they're on the field right behind you. So even somebody like him who's been part of this industry for many years knows it's a matter of time. Is this where we're weak? Okay, guess what? And even their words, you know, I think some of Hisense's words for their XR Clear, you know, kind of thing, they have like their own Reality Pro. They all have that marketing, but they see what the other companies are doing
Mhm,
and they go after it, which is why FOMO, it's made Samsung, LG, and Sony reactive, meaning Sony keeps everything quiet, super quiet. Nothing is said. Nobody knows. Samsung, the first year I was at CES, at least I knew what the TV was called.
yeah.
Right now, so you were looking at the Neo QLED 8K. I'm like, FOMO, that's the 4K. You're like, how do you know? I go, well, the other ones had 8K on them. They didn't even name what they were, other than the secret event we went to. We found out what some of the names
Right,
were,
right, right.
but no zones, no nets, nothing.
Lifestyle, remember? It's all about the
Yep.
lifestyle.
It's all about the lifestyle. So they're out of that. And LG wouldn't even talk about what the primary RGB tandem OLED. They didn't even talk about it.
Nope.
Why? If they get too detailed, there's somebody chilling in the room from Hisense and TCL who writes it down on a pad and they go fly back to China and they build it tomorrow. So they're that reactive now. But I love the cockiness and the confidence of them now. Both companies said to me, a number of their staff, we're looking to win. We're not looking to be in the conversation. I know Hisense is number one in this category. I think it's 100-inch TVs. And I think TCL is number one in 98-inch TVs. It's something like that, right? So,
Yep.
I mean, but if you look at what their numbers are in all TV sales, I think Hisense also has, as far as their enthusiast line is also very
Right.
high up there, number one or number two. So I think for a lot of our community that looks at that and goes, "Ugh, I'm old enough. I'm in my 50s. I remember when that's how people looked at Samsung
Mhm.
and they looked
Look,
at
who's this
LG like,
company?
ugh, what is
Why is it
this?"
so cheap? I mean, the question is,
Yeah,
why is it so cheap? It cut corners, and it did. The first 2 generations of Samsung and LG were all about prices, all
yep,
about getting into the flat panel market
mhm,
and pushing plasma out on price, not on performance, on price
yeah,
and size, right? Oh,
yeah,
you know what? You can get a 32-inch or 48-inch plasma for this price. Well, you can get a slightly larger LCD for
yeah,
half the price. And that's
yeah,
how they took over the market. And plasma,
yeah,
like overnight, lost its sales. It was crazy how
Yeah,
quickly LCD, cheaper LCDs from Samsung and LG took over the plasma market, and then it ended up in the premium end, and then the rest is history. So we're
yep,
seeing it play itself again. And so those of you who are in the market for a TV, I always say, hold on to your TV until it literally breaks, because
yeah,
every year that you wait to buy a TV, the next year will have more features that may be relevant to you, and the prices will drop even further. And
yeah.
that's a beautiful thing.
Well, and FOMO, to your point about plasma, I'll never forget when Samsung did that FS, their plasma, the brightest plasma ever made. That TV's still legendary. People in our community still have it. They just dipped their toe in to show they could do it, and then they backed away from it. That's what these guys do. I mean, TCL has their own RGB and
Yes, they're
mini
RGB
LED.
OLED. They have their
Yeah,
RGB OLED
yeah,
that
their
they're like,
inkjet.
should I
Yeah,
make this? Right. I mean, they acquired Japan OLED, JOLED, right?
yep,
They acquired all the assets, all the IP, all the tooling. And they're like, well, okay, we're making it now, but does it make sense to make TVs? Should we compete with the Koreans in OLED when we're killing it in mini LED?
why
So it's
bother?
still waiting in the
Yeah,
wings. They may not
yeah.
have to ever dip into OLED, ever.
And I like that neither one of them really got they had the foresight to not get involved in 8K. Really.
Mhm.
Say, "Hey,
They had
why
it.
bother?" Yeah,
They had it in the back. BOE is one of the
I remember.
suppliers to
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
companies, right? And they're like, ah, 8K is
before.
a premium that
Yeah,
our viewers don't appreciate, and they shouldn't, by the way. Not like you should ever get an 8K TV. There
yeah,
is a use case for it, but not with the content we have now.
yeah, well, and quickly too with Hisense, um, having the RGB mini LED, they didn't call it a micro LED. You
Right.
know, we saw when we saw in Samsung specs, I saw the word ULED in their micro LED. Right there, I knew before we even left the room that it wasn't a micro LED. We knew it wasn't gonna be anyway, but nobody knew about that TV before we all got there.
Oh,
But
that
I
was a
told you
surprise.
when
Yeah.
I saw ULED in the specs, I was like, "Wait a second, that's their," Hisense calls their TVs ULED. And I was like, "Wow, that's their panel, probably their panel." So, they are the trendsetters, FOMO, and I think we all thought last year which one of them was gonna break into the top 3 and who was gonna be sent down. I don't think that's gonna be the case. I think they're gonna jump over the 3 and meet at the top. Maybe not
Mhm.
next year, but in the next few years, I can't see how, Samsung may still be number 1 in terms of their sales because they have the market cornered in all these different ways, and the things that you're talking about, FOMO, when you talk to the wife or your partners about what are we buying, they're more involved in integration. Is this gonna
Yeah.
work with my lights? Is this gonna work with, "Oh, it
There
has
you
artwork?
go. Lifestyle. Yep.
How does the design?" Samsung's TVs are the best looking TVs both on in many ways, but that TV is off. It's a work of art. The bezel-less design of the 8K. That's when people look at that and go, "Ooh, that's nice." TCL and Hisense are still figuring that out, but
Mhm.
trust me, if that's where it goes, they'll be there too.
It's a formula.
And
As long as
yeah,
if they understand the formula, they put their best design people on it, oh, you'll get something awesome within a year. It's just a matter of identity. If they're committed to that identity, like TCL at CES had a partnership with Bang& Olufsen for their
yeah, yeah,
version of the frame. It
yep,
looked great, but it's not technically for sale because they're still trying to get a feel. Do we
yeah,
want a long-term relationship with Bang& Olufsen? Is that where we want to be? Do we want to
yeah,
go in-house? They have time. There is no rush to take over Samsung's
no,
market.
no,
Because lifestyle does take a lot of goodwill. It does take a lot of understanding of how Americans, North Americans live versus Europeans, a lot smaller living arrangements, right?
yep.
Or versus Asia, also small living arrangements. So it's something that I think will be very surprised where they are in 5 years. Because where they are today is all about arms race. But in five
Yeah.
years, every TV is going to look so great. Where do you need to innovate then?
Yeah, well, and also FOMO, the innovation of the size. We thought, why would you want a large, ugly TV that if you remember the first TCLs that were large, didn't have a lot of local dimming on them. Now it's like, "Oh, wait a minute, are you 8K is 100 inches." You're like, "Wait
Mm,
a second, really? The other companies don't wanna do that, and if they do, they're 15 or $20,000. Oh, $2,000? We'll do that." But FOMO, before we close, the fact is by the time this video will probably be out tomorrow, your TV will be there. My TV's on its way. That is already gutsy. Then you're
Mhm.
looking at maybe the QM7 being after that. Hisense's spring event will be any time now. And I think where years ago, FOMO, when people would ask us, when's the TCL and the Hisense coming out? We're like, I don't know. It'll be sometime. It'll be very, I remember getting my
It's normally in
U7.
the summer. It was
I got
normally in
my
the summer.
U7, yeah, my U7K in July a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
It was like before 4th of July. You're
Mhm.
talking about them pushing that first, getting
Mhm.
that coverage. I think that is unbelievable that they're doing that. I can't wait to see the U16. I can't wait to see what both of these and having this 11 series,
Mhm.
they're going to keep the conversation going all year. But I love that they're not afraid to be first in regards to TCL. That Hisense is doing a totally separate event while they have this massive TV. And actually, FOMO, what's great about what Hisense is doing, the 116 looks gorgeous. But when people see that Samsung RGB micro LED, when they find out that that's not micro LED, they're going to look right back over at Hisense, especially since the price will be much better than you'll see.
I don't think they'll ever find out it's not micro LED because consumers don't look deep enough.
True, you're right.
Well, I mean,
Well,
who's right?
enthusiasts.
Who's going to tell them? I'll guarantee you, Best Buy is not going to say anything. They're going,
Yeah,
oh yeah, it
well,
looks like. I mean, even the salespeople are so ignorant. They'll be like, oh, yeah, it looks like a micro LED to me. They're
yeah,
not going to dissuade that narrative. And technically, it has small mini LED, so they can call it micro LED. But the reality, it isn't. But enthusiasts wouldn't buy it anyway. You know,
yeah. Well, and I
enthusiasts are
think
all about perfection, which is more OLED still.
and what I think they'll do next year, FOMO, this is just me predicting, is if they bring that RGB mini LED to smaller sizes, being 85, it's over. I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
it
because
really.
the significant other will want it.
Yeah, but when you say
It'll
something as good as, like, say, the Bravia 9 and it does this, the U8N and those TVs were nearly as bright, if not brighter. You're talking about this next group is gonna be
Mhm,
5,000 nits?
mhm.
We're talking about 4,000, and I know you guys will all say, "Well, hey, do TVs really need to be that bright?" No, they don't, but the fact is they have it under the hood. If you're gonna compete with OLED, a mini LED needs to be brighter than the OLED. It just needs to be. It's never gonna have the contrast.
Well, we should stop when people say, does it need to be that bright? Dolby Vision, those of you who love Dolby Vision, what was their standard? 10,000
Yeah.
nits.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, guess what? We're only doing what Dolby Vision asked of us, right?
Yeah.
If Dolby Vision is to have its vision fulfilled, it was waiting for the TVs to catch up. Now
Yeah.
that TVs are getting there, what can Dolby Vision do with that level of brightness, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we've been waiting for. So maybe Dolby Vision will show off and flex what they can do now to the greatest degree we've ever seen. And that's why it actually works out. So those of you, why do I need it so bright? Well, you're not watching HDR produced in Dolby Vision that's intended to be 10,000 nits. You don't know. And I don't know, but I'm hoping to know. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, and lastly, with nits, the funny thing is everyone says, "I don't want 5,000 nits." It's never gonna be full field.
No,
These are
no, it's not
specular
5,000.
highlights.
Yeah.
But if
Yes.
you want a mini LED, and quickly, FOMO, where we saw mini LEDs really tank is when they tried to be OLEDs. All of a sudden, they weren't as bright
Yeah.
as they used to be. They were trying you're never gonna win that way. So they were bigger, and then all of a sudden they were smaller because now OLEDs were 77 inches, 83 inches. They need to brute force it. They need to be brighter. They need to have that, and they're going to do that. And that's what's so important. You're okay with a little bit of blooming here and there if you have the zone count and you have the peak brightness. I'm not okay with blooming if I don't have the peak brightness. That's really the issue. But now you have the gaming. But FOMO, this is always amazing us having these conversations. But I want to get the conversation for you guys in the community. Are you at the point now where TCL and Hisense are on your radar, not as the default, right? FOMO, not as the okay, I want to save some money. Would you prefer them even if they were the same price? Are you
Mhm.
willing to now give them a shot? Are you interested to see what both companies are doing? And like you said, FOMO, without these two companies, and I do believe this, without them pushing mini LED would be dead.
Absolutely.
It would be over. I think Samsung would have continued it, but I think between Sony and LG, they would have just ridden OLEDs off into the sunset. You would have been maxed at 83 inches, guys. If you want 100-inch TVs, you want that massive experience. Thank these two companies because mini LED would be gone, in my opinion, if it wasn't for these two.
Yeah, yeah. Them and of course Samsung with its margins loves mini LED, but they wouldn't push performance.
Yeah.
Samsung would still sell you what is, I would think, a subpar performing mini LED because they can get away with it. You don't know what you don't know. And now that you know what you're missing, Samsung's like, oh, I got to keep up with the Joneses, which
Yeah.
they do not want to do. It's
Well,
expensive.
and I think Samsung, lastly, we'll finish up with this. Samsung would have continued to do like the QN90A. They were the first to have their large flagship TVs.
Hmm.
A lot of other TVs were prototypes. There was large plasmas that are freaking 100 inches. But consumer 100-inch Samsung QN90A, that was the flat. I want to say it was 15, $16,000. Sony had the X92, which was 12, 13, 14,000. But because of TCL and Hisense, you're like, they could not continue charging those prices because
Yeah.
their flagships are going to be that big. And if you don't want the flagship FOMO, you can get the 6, you can get the U8, you can get the
Hmm.
7, and that's something the other companies cannot do. So we're rooting for all of them. I'm Brian. This is Tech Therapy. I'm here with my boy, Stop the FOMO. Thank you all so much. Love you guys. Take care.
Bye bye.
It's better to burn out than to fade away.